Our world is full of diagrams. Graphic representations of everything from the solar system to the hidden origins of life. They have a unique ability to express complex ideas simply, and an intellectual and artistic beauty that has the power to inspire awe and change our perceptions. In 1543, a diagram drawn by an obscure but highly educated Polish cleric revealed to the world an idea that was truly revolutionary. A universe, not with the Earth at its centre, but the Sun. His name was Nicholas Copernicus, and he's revered today as the inventor of modern astronomy. And here he is in a rather romanticised 19th century painting, surrounded by the tools of his trade. Tools that helped him to create this extraordinary diagram, which is as pertinent today as it was 500 years ago. And it was this diagram that helped him to answer some of the biggest questions on the scientific books. What does the universe look like? How does it work? And where, crucially, are we in it? In his own time, his concept was an offence against every cherished belief of the age, an offence against learning, against the past, against the Bible. It took the world 150 years to accept his revolutionary ideas, and by then the world had all but forgotten who he was. His diagram revealed the solar system as we know it. Once it was drawn, our sense of our place in the cosmos would never be the same again. At the cathedral in the town of Frombork, in northeast Poland, I'm witnessing an extraordinary event. An elaborate funeral marking the end of a 200-year search for the remains of a Polish churchman and scientist who was originally buried here in an unmarked grave in 1543. The remains are those of Nicholas Copernicus.
Well, this is a pretty amazing event for the locals here, but also for everyone else. There are historians, astronomers, physicists and mathematicians from all over the world, and they come here to see the final formal laying to rest of a man who died nearly 500 years ago. An unsung hero who pretty much invented modern astronomy and started the scientific revolution.
Copernicus's world-changing book was De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. By the time it appeared in print, he was already on his deathbed. At a time when science, the Bible, and plain common sense all agreed that the Earth was static at the centre of the cosmos, Copernicus dared to say different. His was a dangerous idea, one that threatened the very foundations of Western thought itself. This book represents Copernicus's life work, but it's the diagram at the beginning of the book which captures in an instant what the whole book is about. Now, I've known about this diagram for a long time, but this is the first time I've actually seen it in reality. It's really rather beautiful. What this book is all about is the fact that this is a universe, not the Earth at the centre, but the Sun. And here we see the planets going around in concentric circles. The Earth is right out here, Saturn right at the edge. I think it's hard for us to realise today quite how revolutionary an idea this would have been at the time. Copernicus certainly realised. He was afraid to publish the diagram. He was frightened of the scorn he'd get for the absurdity of such an idea. His diagram shows the planets, each numbered and named in Latin, moving round the Sun in circular orbits. It was a vision of the heavens that no one in the world had ever seen, one that flew in the face of the most fundamental ideas about the universe. For over 2,000 years, men had believed that the Earth was static at the centre of the cosmos, with the Sun and planets moving around it. To try to prove otherwise was an act of madness and heresy rolled into one. You can see Copernicus in action. There are lots of little crossings out, just like the crossings out I do in my own work. There are tables here are still waiting for data to be put into them, and he's even drawn a little meteor at the top of this page here. It's really beautiful, and you can see just full of calculations that Copernicus was making at a time when he didn't have a computer to help him out with it all. And it's just beautiful the way he's written his manuscript around the diagram itself. So there it is, the first surviving diagram in human history that puts the Sun at the centre of the universe. Copernicus had sown the seed of what we now know as the heliocentric system. But he wasn't the first man to think about it. The Greeks had toyed with the idea. One of them, Aristarchus, seems to have taken it seriously and suffered ridicule as a result for pursuing an idea that flew in the face of accepted reason. Copernicus would devote his life to what seemed like an impossible theory, a heliocentric universe in which the Earth was both spinning and orbiting the Sun at high speed. And I wonder whether you could explain to me what you think the power of that diagram that Copernicus drew in the book.
The really greatest scientists are ones who are unifiers, and what Copernicus is doing is unifying the planetary system. You can say he invented the solar system.
Why was Copernicus reluctant to publish?
He said that he was afraid of being laughed off the stage. And I wondered, how did he say that in Latin? And the Latin word is explodendum. Who would have guessed that the original meaning of the word explode is to be hissed or booed off the stage? He was afraid that people would consider it too ridiculous.
Why do you think Copernicus felt the need to challenge the status quo? After all, there had been a pretty good explanation of how the planets worked.
If you just wanted to make predictions of where you would find the planets in the sky, the Ptolemaic system was working well enough. Actually, what Copernicus did was not to make it much more accurate, but he paved the way for a much more accurate system.
Now, it seems such a natural idea to us. Why do people just find it difficult to accept this, even scientists?
Well, Copernicus, I think, really believed the cosmos was made that way, but for most people, it was just plain silly. A ridiculous idea. Why? Because if the Earth is spinning around every 24 hours, why don't people just fly off?
We now know that the Earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour, and that it orbits the Sun at a staggering 18 miles a second. Copernicus was the first person in history to identify this double global movement of spin and orbit. It was an extraordinary insight, but one that he couldn't prove. It took Newton's discovery of gravity to explain why we don't fly off. But that was over 140 years after Copernicus died. So his apparently simple diagram posed seemingly unanswerable questions. Even worse, it contradicted one of the greatest scientists of the classical past, the Roman astronomer Ptolemy.
This is the so-called geocentric universe as proposed by Claudius Ptolemy. It has the Earth static at the centre of the universe, and the other planets and the Sun as well are moving around the Earth. I think in this diagram you really get the idea of the Earth at the centre of the universe. Ptolemy had been dead for 1,000 years when Copernicus was born, but his ideas were still considered as gospel truth. At universities across Europe, from here in Oxford through to Warsaw, students and scholars and professors would learn that this was their model of the universe. Above all, this is what they regarded as the truth.
But the truth came at a price. Ptolemy had to make sense of the whole range of planetary movements as seen from his static Earth. To do it, he was forced to invent complex loop-the-loop orbits that he called epicycles. For Copernicus, the Ptolemaic system was too complex, too cumbersome. Planetary orbits, he was convinced, should be simple and circular, harmonious and beautiful. In my old Oxford College, Wadham, I'm meeting a historian with a keen understanding of just how difficult a challenge Copernicus faced. Dr. Alan Chapman.
First of all, let's face it, forget all we know about the last 500 years of astronomy. Do we seem to be flying through space at 80 miles a second? Why, when you drop an object, does it fall straight down rather than flying off into the air? Common sense and experience said the Earth was fixed in the centre of the universe. Also, too, not only do you have Ptolemy, you have the philosophy of Aristotle. And what Aristotle had was a whole system of physics, explaining the weather, explaining meteorological phenomena, comets, all kinds of things. And Aristotle's system was based entirely on an Earth-centered system. So in other words, if you lost your cosmology, if you abandoned Ptolemy and threw him out of the window and said the Earth is spinning in space, you lost all the physics of Aristotle as well. And so really, all you get with the Copernican theory is one thing. You explain the planetary retrogrades more simply than with epicycles, but for that, you lose the rest of classical physics. And so to most people, it was hardly a trade-off.
But it wasn't just the Ptolemy-loving world of scholars that Copernicus had to worry about. It was also the much more powerful world of the Church. The Bible made it clear in Psalm 93 that Ptolemy was right. Thou hast fixed the earth immovable and firm, it reads. To undermine scripture was heresy.
This would have been alarming enough for any Christian scholar in Europe. But what made these theological objections even tougher and more dangerous for Copernicus was the fact that he was a canon looking after one of the altars in this very cathedral in Fromberg. Inside here, he was a man of faith who couldn't countenance publishing such an extraordinary new idea. Out there, however, he was a mathematician, and he couldn't leave the idea alone.
Copernicus moved to Fromberg around 1510. He was then in his mid-30s, An educated man, a graduate of the universities of Krakow, Bologna and Padua. He had degrees in law, divinity and medicine, and spoke several languages. He would spend the rest of his life here, a servant of the great cathedral, where his uncle held the powerful post of bishop. But just across the courtyard from the cathedral is the building that represented his other life, the tower where he carried out his revolutionary work so radical he was afraid to publish it.
During his time in Fromborg, Copernicus made many observations of the night sky, using instruments like this one here, called an armillary sphere. What he would do is to line up this circle with something called the ecliptic, which is the motion that the sun makes through the sky. And then he would use these other circles to line up the planets and measure their changing angles as they move. This is actually a piece of old technology. Even the ancient Greeks would have been using this one. Copernicus believed that Ptolemy's explanation for the motion of the planets through the sky was just too complicated, too unwieldy to be true. Copernicus believed that there must be a much more elegant, beautiful solution for the observations that he was making. In fact, many scientists, me included, believe that that desire for simplicity and beauty often leads to the truth.
Drawing the diagram, he began to see the simplicity and beauty he sought. Each planet on a uniform circular orbit around the sun. It was a radical new system for the whole universe. But the diagram's consequences seemed unthinkable. Earth was ousted from its unique central position and hurled millions of miles out into the dark void of space. And even if it was right, how could he ever prove it? His manuscript reveals what he went through to try to do it. He begins with a description of his heliocentric universe. But almost all the pages in this extraordinary work are not about words, but numbers. Because the key for Copernicus was mathematics.
As a mathematician, it's these pages full of calculations, theorems and geometric drawings that I find really exciting. It's these that underpin the diagram. Here's Copernicus, the mathematician, working out an incredibly abstract mathematical problem.
It was a scientific number-crunching exercise on an epic scale. He took the data from thousands of years' worth of previous astronomical observations, combined it with his own, and painstakingly recalculated all the planetary positions to see if his bold new theory fitted the facts. And the more he worked, the more he became convinced that he was right.
Pedro, as a cosmologist, how accurate is Copernicus's diagram of a model of the solar system today?
Well, it's still pretty accurate. We know that there's another planet out here, Neptune, but it looks very much like this. I mean, of course, the distances aren't exactly right, but the orbits are pretty circular.
What's your sense of the scale of Copernicus's achievement in actually producing this diagram 500 years ago?
I think it's incredible. I mean, I think it basically kick-started a chain of events which pushed us into being able to do what we do today. He pointed out that we're not at the center of the solar system, but we now know that the solar system isn't even at the center of the galaxy. What we know is the Milky Way. It's about 24,000 light years away from the center. And our galaxy is one of many billions of galaxies in the universe. So we're pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things.
Isn't it quite striking that, you know, in our very modern age that we're still coming back to this, 500-year-old diagram as our picture of our solar system?
Well, it's fascinating because, it's right. So, if you sit in front of your child, you will draw this. They want to explain the solar system, this is what you'll draw. If we ask an adult, can you
describe the solar system, this is what they'll draw. So I think this is a wonderful piece of information. It's a wonderful diagram.
But Copernicus's extraordinary diagram might never have seen the light of day. By 1540, he was 67 and had been working on his sun-centered cosmos for over 3 decades. But still, he was afraid to publish. In that year, however, the arrival in Fromborg of a young German mathematician changed the fate of Copernicus and the diagram forever. His name was Georg Rheticus. We don't know for certain how Rheticus even found out about this startling new theory. The now elderly Copernicus had produced a handwritten pamphlet, never published, which he distributed amongst friends. Perhaps Rheticus had heard about this. However he found out, Rheticus has gone down in history as the world's first Copernican. In fact, in 1540, he was probably the world's only Copernican. But Rheticus had come here with a purpose, to persuade Copernicus to publish. After decades working alone, Copernicus finally had a student and supporter. Perhaps Rheticus gave the old man courage, because eventually the young German left Fromborg with the manuscript and permission to publish. Soon it was in print. And here it is. Once the ink had dried on the diagram, the way we viewed ourselves and our place in the universe changed forever. Legend has it that the last pages of the printer's proofs were placed in Copernicus's hands just before he died. So, as he departed the world, his revolutionary book, representing his whole life's work, arrived. And what did the world make of it? Some were appalled. The Protestant firebrand John Calvin is said to have asked, "Who will venture to place the authority of Copernicus above that of the Holy Spirit?" And the trouble didn't end there.
In 1616, the Inquisition placed the book on its index of prohibited books and issued 10 instructions about how the book should be amended to meet theological requirements. By inserting words like hypothesis, they practically neutered the potency of this book, changing it from being a description of physical reality into being just some theoretical, abstract game. Copernicus wasn't hissed off the stage. He was frog-marched out of the theatre.
His early supporters, among them the great scientist Galileo, found themselves in hot water. He was accused of heresy and placed under house arrest for supporting Copernicus's ideas. But as the scientific revolution got underway, the once heretical diagram began to enter the mainstream. In 1660, this elaborate celestial atlas by mapmaker Andreas Cellarius turned the diagram into high art, with a smiling sun, the planets rendered in lavish beauty, and Copernicus himself immortalized on the page. But it took Isaac Newton's discovery of gravity nearly 150 years after Copernicus died to finally convince the world that he was right. We're now so attuned to the Copernican system that we don't even think about it. But the remarkable space signpost in the Science Centre at Bristol is designed to make us do just that. Using state-of-the-art technology, it tracks the rapidly changing distances between Earth and the planets in real time. Physicist Dr. Adam Nyman
designed the signpost 10 years ago as a combination of scientific instrument and conceptual art.
The project originally was called Welcome to the Neighbourhood. That was the idea.
That's nice. So that sort of captures that sense that Copernicus did with his diagram, that we aren't at the centre of things, we're a little neighbourhood and here are the planets.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Copernicus's diagram shows us is that we can feel at home in our solar system, and that's what Space Signpost is trying to do.
So, and how would you say that it helps us understand, for example, Copernicus's idea of that we're not at the centre of things?
One interesting way it does that is, I can demonstrate, if I select Pluto, you'll see that the signpost will move around,
Right, yeah.
and it'll point to Pluto,
Yeah.
and you see what happens is it's pointing below the horizon, it's pointing straight into the Earth.
It's pointing at me.
People expect space to be up, and things in space should be up. And then they realise, well, actually, we're on a round planet, and space is all around our round planet, and so the quickest way to get to Pluto at the moment
It's through the Earth and out the other side.
that's right.
Very
so that's the
Yeah, and now actually it is moving constantly, which is, I guess, also something that
yeah.
there we are, Pluto moving again. I suppose, is that something that people get out of it, that sense that we aren't in a fixed universe, but a dynamic one?
It is. That's another thing. If I make it point back to Mars, you can see when it gets there.
Yes.
We can see these numbers. There's 236,423,465 kilometres. That's changing really very fast.
That's really fast. I mean, it's hundreds of kilometres being added.
Yeah, every second or so, and that comes as a surprise to people. It's people have an expectation that things in space are pretty much static, that they stay. So Space Signpost turns the universe into a dynamical universe. So that's one of the surprises.
And I guess that's in a way that Copernicus's diagram sort of gives a very static view, a sort of snapshot. But this is like almost animating Copernicus's diagram.
Yeah, this is it's easier for us these days.
Yes.
Today, our notion of space still owes everything to Copernicus and his diagram. And 500 years after it was made, the man himself is finally receiving the honour that never came to him in life. He was originally buried in the cathedral here in Fromborg in 1543, the very year his revolutionary diagram was first published. We don't know why his grave was never marked, but since 1802, devotees of his work and life have been searching for his remains. Finally, in 2008, a skeleton was found, and miraculously, so were some hairs inside one of the books in Copernicus's library. A DNA comparison proved a match, and a 200-year search was at an end.
His story really comes full circle here at his grave in Fromborg. It was a genuinely moving experience to see the final laying to rest of such an iconic figure in the history of science. Although the man is now just bones in a box, the diagram which sits above his grave will live forever. It's a diagram which changed our understanding of the nature of the universe and our place in it.
That his diagram still speaks to us now is testament to his achievement. A diagram drawn half a millennium ago, not far from this very spot, that captures an essential, beautiful truth that to this day we have not bettered.
Coming up next this evening here on BBC HD, double comedy with Reggie Perrin, followed by Him and Her. And then at 11:30, it's Ancient Worlds.